We are on to week 3 of the NFL season. Time to give you some sneaky ads. If you're looking at the waiver wire heading into week 3, Jeff, it's still a disaster. If you need help at running back, we'll give you some wide receivers, some tight ends to consider, but we got to start at the quarterback position. Some serious carnage at quarterback coming out of week 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, not often that a win feels like a loss. It's a Pyrrhic victory. Joe Burrow out 3 months at least with the toe surgery. But with injury comes opportunity. Jake Browning in super flex leagues is obviously a must add, but he's probably an add in many weeks as well. Wouldn't love him this week at Minnesota, but I do think with the weapons he has to work with there and his past history, he's a startable quarterback. He deserves to be rostered in our leagues. Pick him up even in 12-team leagues. Make sure, don't, if you have another quarterback with the week 10 bye, I wouldn't do it, but otherwise I think you should. I like Browning better than Carson Wentz. Better than, Marcus Mariota if Jaden Daniels doesn't play. Some news on him. The one guy I might pick up over all of those is Daniel Jones. And I can't believe in the year of 2020 of our Lord, I'm saying this here, the Colts have had 0 punts this year. Daniel Jones has 3 rushing touchdowns. And I think that's really important to pick up, that he's getting every single 1-yard carry at the goal line there. The Colts are moving the ball, and he has a good supporting cast. Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Tyler Warren, of course, Jonathan Taylor as well. I think Daniel Jones deserves to be rostered in our fantasy football leagues. He's only 18% rostered on Yahoo after 2 good weeks.
And he gets the Tennessee Titans in week 3, which I still think is a decent defense, but still an advantageous matchup. Look, I'm with you on Jake Browning. Should be rostered, especially in 2 quarterback leagues. This guy was a top 20 quarterback a couple of years ago when he had to make those 8 appearances. Last time Joe Burrow went out, great weapon when you're around him. The Bengals are going to allow him to be aggressive. They need to do everything they can to tread water until Joe Burrow is hopefully back late in the season. You mentioned Marcus Mariota. Certainly sounds as though Jaden Daniels is going to miss at least 1 game in the short term. Mariota, not exciting necessarily, but he's capable. He's experienced, should give you some rushing production. Still only 31 years old. We did see him a couple of times last season. He took over for Jaden Daniels early in a game against Carolina, finished with 205 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 11 carries for 34 yards. He played the second half in week 18 against Dallas, put up 161 yards and 2 touchdowns, 5 carries for 56. Should be a decent matchup, you would think, against the Raiders this week. We'll learn more about their defense, of course, on Monday night. But as of right now, to me, that's a plus matchup. And then, of course, we have Carson Wentz taking over for J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota. Allegedly a high ankle sprain for J.J. McCarthy. I'm not exactly sure when he sustained that. People are saying it was in the third quarter, still played through it, but sounds like he could end up missing multiple weeks. Frankly, Jeff, I feel better about the Minnesota offense right now with Carson Wentz than I do J.J. McCarthy. Vikings get the Bengals at home this week. That should be a good matchup. Then they play Pittsburgh over in Ireland. We are getting Jake Browning versus Carson Wentz, by the way, in week 3. So batten down the hatches, prepare for that one. But again, much like the Cincinnati situation, you have capable weapons around you. You have a high-level head coach in Kevin O'Connell scheming things up. You get Jordan Addison back, by the way, in a couple of weeks for that Ireland game. So you're never going to be thrilled when you're replacing Jaden Daniels, or if you were somebody who invested in J.J. McCarthy, all of a sudden Carson Wentz is out there. But I think there is some appeal for those quarterbacks taking over. And the last thing I'll say before we move on to the dread that is the running back position, Michael Penix is still out there in 70% of ESPN leagues. If you do need a quarterback this week, he gets Carolina in week 3. And I think that will be a significantly better matchup than what we saw against Minnesota on Sunday night. All right, Jeff, running backs. I was just scratching and clawing to come up with some names. I'm curious who you have.
Well, we know Aaron Jones isn't going to play. He's got his own injury there. It is Jordan Mason to the moon. I'm presuming he's rostered. And in fact, I don't think anybody dropped him after the first couple of weeks because actually he looked good when he played. But he's going to get heavy usage in a primo matchup against the Bengals. I would just say use him for DFS play. That might be your play there. His backup is Xavier Scott. I had to look it up because Ty Chandler is on IR right now. They've got a number of other there might be other players out on the waiver, the real life waiver wire that they pick up off the street or off their practice squad. I assume they will be adding somebody to do that there. Xavier Scott started the last preseason game, dealt with an ankle injury. He was on the Minnesota practice squad last year. It would require a sicko league to use him, but maybe you pick him up because under the theory that Mason needs somebody that is a backup there. But even still, great matchup, but terrible Minnesota offensive line this week too. I mean, that's one of the things. Maybe they get Christian Darrisaw back, and that makes things better. But right now it's a rough look for Minnesota on their offensive line. Instead, I'm looking at Washington. Unfortunately, Austin Eckler out for the season. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, we're frustrated with his usage. It will pick up this week, but we know he's not going to be in there on third downs. It's going to be Jeremy McNichols most likely, unless it's Chris Rodriguez, who's been a healthy scratch the first 2 weeks. I think McNichols is a pickup. I think he's the guy that maybe of all the running backs we're going to mention, he's the guy I'm most interested in right now as a pickup.
Yeah, I'll run through a couple options here. Again, none of these very exciting. Miles Sanders, is somebody, if you're in a deeper league, maybe you speculate a little bit. Javonte Williams, obviously playing really well so far as the RB1. So there's not really a debate there, but Sanders very clearly ahead of the rookie Jaden Blue, who was inactive in week 2. Saw 20 snaps, 5 carries, 2 targets. Again, nothing too exciting, but that Dallas running game has been better than we expected. Kyle Monungai in Chicago. I mean, Bears already feels like their backs are against the wall. And, DeAndre Swift has been just fine. He's been DeAndre Swift so far. But we did see more Monungai in week 2. 28 snaps, was targeted 3 times, carried 8 times. Game was completely out of hand, early in the third quarter. So hard to take too much away from that. But Ben Johnson did say coming out of week 1, they did want to mix him in a little bit more. And then if we're really digging deep, Antonio Gibson for the Patriots. I'm still holding out hope for TreVeyon Henderson. I need TreVeyon Henderson on a lot of my teams, but barely played in week 1, played only 19 snaps in week 2. You do worry if he's kind of landed in the doghouse already with Mike Vrabel. Gibson played only 10 snaps, but he was targeted or carried on 6 of those 10. So if we do see even a further reduction for TreVeyon Henderson, maybe there's a little bit there for Gibson. Then I'll throw out Tyler Algier. He's available in 65% of ESPN leagues, so not sneaky, but if you do need help at running back right now, decent chance Algier is out there, carried or targeted on 17 of 22 snaps on Sunday night against Minnesota.
I got one more to add on for you, actually, my friend, before we move on to wide receiver. Blake Corum got a 30% snap share yesterday against Tennessee, got that rushing touchdown. He might actually truly be a backup now and not just a scraps player that the Rams often have behind their starting running back. I think they are going to try to rest Kyren Williams a little bit more frequently. So I think Corum is actually rosterable.
Let's move on to the wide receiver position, Jeff. I'm going to start with the Green Bay Packers here. Romeo Doubs, he's right on the borderline, I would say, of being considered sneaky. He is 80% available right now in ESPN League. So we know Jaden Reed is going to miss what sounds like probably 2 months, maybe more. So make sure you check for Romeo Doubs first. It's not saying a whole lot with the volume for this Packers passing game so far, but he has been the Packers' most targeted receiver through these first 2 games. 3 red zone targets, caught a touchdown in that Thursday night win over Washington. If you don't like Doubs, if he's not available, maybe take a look at Dontavian Wicks. Again, you worry about the volume for Green Bay. You're always going to worry, but taking Reed out of the mix, it at least helps solve that issue. Wicks had 4 catches on 6 targets on Thursday night. It's early, Jeff, but I will say the hands have looked a little bit better. He's made a couple tough catches already this season. He is somebody that the Packers do trust despite the up and down season last year. And I think we will see his snap share rise.
I like it. To the extent that I like anybody in that Green Bay pass catching group. The thing is, their defense is so good. I almost feel like that is going to just hold back everything along the way. And that's just the problem we're running into there. A good problem to have if you're Green Bay. I like Io Manor for the Tennessee Titans. Caught the first touchdown pass of Cameron Ward's career. He's on the field constantly. He is now definitely the Tennessee number 2. He surpassed Tyler Lockett, who is maybe the 5th receiver now in Tennessee. Io Manor is a guy that I think is going to be increasingly a part of this passing game. Ridley's still the number 1, but Io Manor might be useful in bye weeks for us.
Yep.
I throw out Denver's Troy Franklin, who seems to be surpassing Marvin Mims. Mims did get a touchdown reception of his own, but Franklin was the guy that was on the field constantly, lots of targets against the Colts. I like that. And finally, Tyquan Thornton, Mr. Go Route himself. When all you have is Tyquan Thornton go routes, at least you have that there. And guess what? They face the Giants this week. I think there'll be a few more attempts at that this week on the Sunday night game.
Yeah, I like the call on Troy Franklin. Led all Denver receivers in snaps, in routes, in targets, even got a carry in week 2, was targeted 9 times by Bo Nix. Obviously, Courtland Sutton is the guy in Denver, but I think we're going to see a lot of defenses continue to hyper-focus on taking him away. And big gap so far between Franklin and Sutton, and then, the secondary options in that receiver room, Trent Sherfield, Marvin Mims. I will throw out De'Ami Brown, Jeff, who kind of ended up as the GOAT, one of many GOATs in that Jaguars loss to Cincinnati in week 2 at the critical drop that basically ended up losing the Jags the game. But through 2 weeks, he's got 8 catches, 109 yards, 11 targets, did find the end zone earlier in that game in week 2. I don't know what's going on with Brian Thomas. There's just been no connection so far between Lawrence and him. 5 catches on 19 targets. Would not be surprised if that takes a little bit of time to sort out. And we do see more of De'Ami Brown. I also think, by the way, if you're looking at the Jags in general, they're not going to be able to run the ball as effectively as they have these first 2 weeks. You get Carolina and Cincinnati. The schedule stiffens up significantly in terms of the opposing defenses in these next few weeks. So I do think we're going to see more passing volume. And then I want to give a quick shout out, Jeff, to the 0.1% of people in ESPN leagues who started Hunter Renfrow this week, played 69 of 85 snaps for the Panthers, saw 9 targets, 2 touchdowns. He's got 15 targets over the last 2 weeks. Saw a massive jump in his snap share this week. And Carolina just lost 2 starting offensive linemen. They already struggled to run the ball. It's a team that's going to be trailing a ton. Maybe we're not going to get 55 pass attempts out of Bryce Young every week, but I think it's going to be a high volume system. So I don't mind taking a look at Hunter Renfrow.
Dave Canales was actually asked about Xavier Legette's snaps. Legette had a couple bad plays against Arizona. That augurs well if you have Hunter Renfrow. So yeah, I think he's rosterable too.
All right, let's move on to the tight end position, Jeff. Once again, a bounty of options here. And I will mention, Juwan Johnson is now out of the sneaky zone, still available in over half of ESPN leagues. He is first among tight ends in expected fantasy points per game. He's second in first read target share. He's second in percentage of team yards, top 5 in yards per game and route share. So if Juwan Johnson is still out there, especially with Spencer Rattler playing semi-credible football right now, go get Juwan Johnson. Who else do you have on your list? Somebody maybe a little bit more sneaky, Jeff.
Yeah, that was the center square for sure. Jashavian Sanders, 1% roster on Yahoo, 9 catches so far this year, many targets. Again, we're not going to count on heaven forfend Bryce Young throwing it 55 times in a game. I think that's not necessarily a good recipe for success. But Sanders is definitely the tight end guy there. I'd like him in the leagues where Johnson was picked over, Fannin was picked over, all the obvious guys were picked up last week. I like Sanders the best.
Yeah, he was my number 1 as well. 10 targets on 38 routes in week 2. And, kind of disappointing in week 1. We saw more Tommy Tremble than we expected. But week 2, I think, was a little bit more realistic in terms of what we can expect going forward. And then I'll throw out Isaiah Likely again this week. I don't know if he returns in week 3, but that return is coming. He's available in about 93.5% of ESPN leagues right now. Mark Andrews off to a slow start. We know the Ravens are comfortable using both tight ends, so maybe go grab him, especially if you can afford to hold him for a couple of weeks. And then I'll mention him, Jeff, Jake Tonjes out in San Francisco, stepping in for George Kittle. He's available just about everywhere right now. Played 56 of 71 snaps in that game against the Saints. Was only targeted 5 times, nothing explosive, but I think the snap share is at least notable. Did catch a touchdown in week 1. All right, that's going to do it for our sneaky ads leading into week 3 of the NFL season. Make sure you check out everything we have over at RotoWire.com. Promo code YouTube15. Type that in at RotoWire. 15% off anything we offer. Best of luck this week. We'll talk to you next week.